And then cool. Thanks, Dave. Welcome everyone. Nick Wagner Sr. It's Sunday night at 8 o'clock Eastern, and welcome to another episode of the Full Potential Podcast. I'm your host, Nick Wagner Sr. You know what, Dave? I'm going to just share a little bit about the podcast real quick before we jump in with
Sure.
you as our guest for this Sunday. So almost every Sunday, Dave, I run into people from all different kinds of organizations and careers and backgrounds, and I bring people on this show to have them share their career journeys with my audience. And as an HR professional, I am like really proud of all of the stories that people have shared over the past almost 4 years at this point, because I think a lot of people that listen to this podcast are early career professionals, and they get a real sense of like what could be with their career, because if you're just graduating from school, you don't know where your career might take you. So I have people like yourself on that have had very unique careers, and you didn't, you've gone in a lot of different directions, which is the point of why I have people on to share their stories. So we do this. We record it live here on LinkedIn and YouTube and Facebook, and then I'll just take the audio and put it on all the major podcast platforms for everyone to listen to, whether you listen on Apple, Google, Spotify, etc. So, it's been the thing that I love about this is I get to meet so many different people, and hopefully, if just a couple people listen to one of my guests and like, wow, I didn't even know that was a career option, and go look into something that might change their career directory. So I appreciate you making time. So Dave Conelias, welcome to the podcast tonight, and I'm truly grateful to have you here.
No, Nick, thanks for having me on. I love what you're doing. It's something that no one ever sat me down and kind of gave me this kind of discussion when I was younger, and I did okay, but I wandered around a lot, and then finally started making direct choices, right? Making purposeful choices. So I think if we can get a few younger folks to hear this, or even older folks, but that's great. I love helping out with anything.
Yeah, and we're going to learn all about your journey, because you were an engineer at some of the biggest companies in the world that people think of when they think of engineering. Now you're an entrepreneur. You're running your own education startup, which I think if people looked at your background, they'd be like, how did you end up in an education startup? So we'll find that out. But I want to start with, I always start at the beginning for people, which is like, when you were a little kid, when you were a little Dave, was your dream to be an engineer? Was your dream to be an entrepreneur? Like what did you want to do when you grew up, when you were a little kid?
So that's a tough one. I think my mom always knew I'd be doing something with my hands, right? I was taking apart all the stuff in the house, trying to put it back together, usually failing miserably, right, when I was 10. But she knew I wasn't, business school focused, right? So I ended up going to a liberal arts college with engineering, and then figured out later that I probably should have been an engineer from the start. But I didn't want to stay extra years, so I just and we can get into that a little bit. But yeah, there's definitely a few distinct sides to me. All the outdoors sports side is a whole other world, and then you have kind of a technical side, and then this love of teaching and learning, and kind of this ability to sponge things up and then help others learn that. So there's kind of three different sides there.
And I want to ask this question because I think it's relevant for the people that listen. So you knew you didn't want to go to business school. You thought, your mom thought you should probably work with your hands. Was the expectation you were going to college in your household growing up? Like, was that what Dave was going to do?
The expectation was there. I'm the age group that everyone was expected to go to college, right? I think the world's waking up to that's not really for everyone. It's almost a joke now. I say, if I would be perfectly happy doing construction all day, right? If it was, in the hot attic in the summer, that'd be a little rough. But beyond that, I'd be perfectly happy. Just, hey, you gotta, dig this hole, frame this thing, and I did those summer jobs as well, so I had experience with it. But the kind of the stepping stones was college, right? And I think fair enough, that opens a lot of doors. And I had the fortune of I wasn't paying for college, so myself with loans, so there was no real reason not to. But that's one of the big ones I talk about with students is if you're paying for it, that equation to even back out, that's a rough equation if you're taking out loans. So, find other ways to do it is usually my advice.
Yeah, you got to look at what's your return on investment going to college,
Yeah.
if you're going to be paying for it. And I totally agree. And I think you're also right that the world has been shifting where I think a lot of students coming out of high school now are realizing there's a lot of other opportunities besides a 4-year college, and you can still be wildly successful. Which I think
Right.
I'm glad you mentioned that. So you ended up with 2 degrees, a Bachelor of Science
Hmm.
in, I think it was right, math and economics,
Hmm.
and then you got a master's in engineering.
So a master's in, it's called a management of technology. So it's a management of technical projects. So it's kind of like an MBA for engineers. So the way that happened is I graduated in 2008, got my first job at Sikorsky as an engineer. So kind of even without the degree, stumbled my way in there, and then went right back in that next fall in 2009 to do a master's. And their program at that time, they paid 100%. They gave you time off, so it was this unbelievable program. So why not do it, right? It was so I went to Fairfield U and got that kind of. And the reason I did it was I didn't have experience. And basically that major, you could do the MBA, but I didn't want to go towards, I didn't want to take 3 accounting classes. I only want to take 1. And then you study things like the Toyota method, product life cycle design, and you gain experience that would take me 10 years inside Sikorsky to gain. So that was the goal of it.
So I think this is a common question that people ask. You did not have an engineering degree when you got into Sikorsky, but you got into one of probably the most well-known engineering companies, manufacturing companies in the world, right? Sikorsky
Mhm.
they make some really amazing helicopters. So how did you manage to end up at Sikorsky?
So that was everyone says it, and it's true. That was a connection of a connection, right? So a friend of a friend got me an internship, right? So they kind of passed around my resume, and I was taking technical classes. So I took 3D modeling classes. I took all the lower level engineering classes. I just didn't want to stay longer and get a second degree. So I had some technical background, and then I went to work for a group. I did an internship 2 different summers, and they ended up hiring me. So it was a lot of learning as you go, right? Some of that background I didn't have, and if you put me in a super technical role, I probably wouldn't be the right fit for that. But the role I was in was more general problem solving, supporting manufacturing, understanding the process, and helping things go smoothly. So kind of big picture engineering is what I ended up falling into.
And share with my audience, because I think a lot of people that aren't engineers or have never worked at a manufacturing, company, what, how does it work, right? So the end goal here is a helicopter,
Mm-hmm.
right? They make multiple versions of helicopters that many people probably heard of, including I think they make Marine One, which is the president's helicopter.
Mm-hmm.
How does one person like yourself fit into that broader equation of building a helicopter?
Yeah, so it's the you're one little thing inside a giant machine, right? And that was one part of Sikorsky I never liked. The corporate world's a little slow for me. You only get to do one thing. Now you get very good at that one thing, and you can change what you do, but you still get one little job. So there's 400 engineers, 1,000 manufacturers, 1,000 other people like purchasing and supply management, all working on making this product. No one person knows how the whole thing works. So it's massively really cool product, but you only know how a little bit of it works. So really, really fun to work on in that sense. Like it's cool, but then it's very boring because you do the same job over and over and over. Now that's good because it comes out right. But I found it a little bit boring for me. So I ended up in the 8 years I was there, I had 3 or 4 different roles. So I kind of jumped around and learned it would be maybe in the same group, but I would ask to change my role. So instead of doing drawings, I was supporting manufacturing from our group. So I would do things like that to keep myself entertained.
No, and I think you bring up a great point that I think for a lot of people, they think that they're going to do the same job for the rest of their career. Like, I'm going to graduate from school, I'm going to get a job, and I'm going to do the same job. And that couldn't be farther from the truth, because you just gave a perfect example of how many jobs you had within Sikorsky where you were broadening your knowledge and doing different things. So
Mm-hmm.
I think it's a great point. Don't be afraid to move around, because you're going to keep learning it and growing as you
Yeah.
do that. But I got to ask the question. So, like, you between Sikorsky and Bauer, which is the other company you worked at, you
Mm-hmm.
had this super successful engineering career for around 10 years, a decade,
Mm-hmm.
which you decided to just kind of just stop, put on hold, and do something completely different, literally completely different. So I want to take people through your journey here of you started Milestone C before you left Sikorsky.
Mm-hmm.
What was the dream, and how
Yeah.
did this whole thing happen? Like walk us through how this came
Yeah.
to be.
So let me back up to like 2009. So right after I graduated college, I'm working at Sikorsky. There was always this. I had my official job, and then there was this background effort. Both my parents had. My dad owned a company, and then my mom had worked at a small company. So I was much more mindset of from that world, where kind of the smaller company world. And when I switched to Bauer, one of the reasons I did it is because I was a small company, right? It was like 75 people, so established, but I'd say small. 20 engineers, they had manufacturers, they had purchasing. So one of the reasons I switched is I wanted to work in a small company as part of my career and see how that works, see the ins and outs of it, see how the owners are involved with the engineering decisions, and one of the lead sales guys was the other owner. So seeing how that was one of the reasons I went to Bauer. So back in 2009, right, I had my job, but then I was always doing something in the background. So early on, my brother and I were making skis and snowboards in our garage. Like trying to we built a press. We had a heated press that we would, built like out of metal and wood, and then epoxying the skis and building, planing down the cores, and got really technical with it. Never really ended up doing anything. We kind of moved on. Fast forward a couple more years, I look at cured meats, so like prosciutto and those kind of meats, because I make that with my family. I looked at making that a business, and I have like pages and pages, and I listened to, this was when podcasts were getting popular and YouTube videos, listening to all that, and pages written on it, and ended up being like, no, that one's not right, because the inspections are really crazy, and you have to spend a lot of money you can make like a farmer's market kind of thing, but then to go to the next step, you need a full-blown factory, and you get inspected all the time for ready-to-eat food. Then I looked at beer brewing, so that was my next, but I was kind of late to that game, and I saw how many breweries were popping up. Now, 5 years later, I realized there was still an upheaval happening, so could have done that. But I also, one of the things was, the thing I read is, I do it beer brewing as a hobby, right? I do it at home. When you do it professionally, you're just a janitor. You're cleaning all day. The machines do everything, right? So it's not quite the same thing. So that was always in the background of, hey, what can I do for a business? What can I start up? What can I branch out to do? And then what happened was I was kind of bored with my corporate job, and we started teaching after school and summer camps. So we started Milestone C and just said, hey, let's teach a summer camp. And, we always had, we had cool toys like drones and flight simulators. We knew how to do that stuff. So we just started teaching kids. And what happened there is education was hungry for teaching kids through application. Now that sounds fancy, but really that's how everyone learns on their job. Right. So we were teaching kids like they were interns. And I say kids, it was middle school and high school. And we were just treating them like interns or new employees, giving them a bunch of stuff, seeing what they did well with, seeing where they didn't, and then helping them. And that really resonated with education. It's what education was hungry for. They call it project-based learning and learning through application. Like, they have all these fancy names for it that I didn't know at the time. But all the schools got hungry for it. So it went from after school and summer camps, which we still do. Pre-pandemic, that kind of died out in the last year or two. But then it turned into teachers saying, hey, that's great after school, but I want it during the day. I want to see those kids doing that during the day. Can you build this curriculum? We didn't know what that was, right? That was a lot more work than we thought. So we pulled in a couple educators to help us do that and make it classroom friendly. It's very different constraints on teachers than after school. After school, you're kind of wild west. You can do whatever you want.
Yeah.
So we learned how to make it classroom friendly. Our first curriculum was like 3 courses put together. We just overshot, right? And it was meant for an engineer to be teaching it. So we overshot there. So now we've learned to make it classroom friendly. Our training program is meant for a teacher, not an engineer, right? So we've adapted it, and we've learned how to do education properly. Now, to answer your question fully, I think the reason I enjoy Milestone C is I always like teaching people. I'd be sitting in Sikorsky and I would teach the interns all day, and then I'd do my job for like an hour, and I'd be like, oh, I'm behind, right? And it was always I was always happier when I was teaching them. Now, that also rewards me because once I get them efficient, they do my work, right? If they're my interns, so it's very helpful, and not just interns, but coworkers, everybody. I
Absolutely.
love teaching people. So I think now that I'm in education fully, that's all I do is train teachers. We, helping students learn. So it's kind of a natural fit for me.
And and I want to make sure because this is a pivotal point in your career.
Mm-hmm.
You started Milestone in January of 2017, and you left Sikorsky March of 2018. So you had an overlap of a little over a year.
Mm-hmm.
Tell me about the actual decision because this is a huge inflection point for you, where you quit your successful corporate engineering job to go work for yourself.
Yeah, it took some fun discussions with my wife to say, it's okay. We'll be fine. I was also, so this was 2018. So I had two small children, right? And depends on the timing. I'd have to, let's see, it was they'd be 1 and 2, somewhere around there. So two small children, and I'm like, yeah, I think Milestone C will be fine. I think but at the time it's a brand new company, like truly a startup. We had revenues, but the forecast was all over the place, right? It could be great, it could be terrible. We didn't have any history to go on, so it was a little bit of on faith. But also, I'm of the opinion is if you need to make it successful, you will, right? So if you go both feet in, you'll make it successful. So the timing was right where it wouldn't blow up the company's finances if I did that. I made sure we had a little bit of a piggy bank in case it got rough in 6 months. So it was a calculated decision. It was also hurting my brain a little bit to do both because now Sikorsky at the time had a really great program where I could work. It's almost like part-time, full-time. So you could work less than 40 hours, but keep your benefits. And you just have to set that up with your boss, make sure they sign off on it, right? Everybody knows it. So I reduced my hours there, ramp my hours up. For about 6 months, I did that. But it's like having two jobs. Even though I don't need to be there for that many hours, you still have two things on your mind. So that hurts the brain a little bit. So I then was like, all right, I had enough. Let's go full time.
And you mentioned you and your founder. So who is the co-founder that you started this with, and why did you choose one co-founder?
So the co-founder, he was someone I was working with at the time, and we came up with the idea. We taught that first summer camp. Since then, he's moved on, and I have a partner, Josh Gilbert, and Josh is the software version of me, right? He's a software guru where I don't know that world, and that's kind of so I can, let me be fair, I can dabble in it, but I don't know it, right? I can fake it, I can teach it to students, but they go 6 layers deep. I don't know the answers where Josh does. So his skill set was a huge benefit to us. So the core of it was, now advice to anybody starting a company, it's tough. It's nice to have a partner in crime. But you have to make sure you have the same vision and you're essentially marrying that person, your business marrying that person. So It's a tough decision. The advice I can give is I wouldn't do it with a friend because you know them as a friend. It's much easier to do that with a coworker because you know them as a coworker. You've seen them at work. I've also seen people be successful. They do it themselves, but that's a bit of then no one else has the skin in the game that you do. So even if you have somebody that you get input from, they don't see it day to day. So it's tough to be that kind of lone person on the mountain.
No, I think that's great advice. My business was with 3 friends. We were 20 when we started it, and we didn't know any better. And it was hard. I mean, so I think that's great advice. And I think doing it on your own, like you said, is also difficult because then it's just you.
Yeah.
So share with my audience. So you left your corporate job, you had the conversation, and I like how you did both for a little bit to kind of ease your way in, and then eventually go to your own thing. And you had the conversation with your wife, and you planned for this. So I love how purposeful you were in the planning. originally you were just doing summer camps. What is Milestone C today? Like if to describe to my audience, what does the company do? Because it's a lot more than just summer camps, like you said. So what are the products and services that your company sells?
Yeah, so if you look, so we're in the ed tech world. Now there's a few different worlds inside that. It's laptops and Wi-Fi kind of stuff. We are a curriculum, uh, professional development for teachers, and then equipment. So when you say, "Hey, I want a robotics class in my high school. I want to run 2 sections of it, period 3 and 5." We supply the curriculum, we supply the equipment, the robots in that case, and we supply the teacher training and support. And we do everything from drones to aviation to software to robotics, kind of any of those fun topics. We're working on an artificial intelligence course. That's our prototype right now, and a green technology course. That's our other prototype. So when I say prototype, we go teach them ourselves. That's how we try them out and see what works. And then we build them up into full semester long courses.
And we'll make sure to link to your website in the show description, which
Yeah.
is milestonec.com. But I guess for a lot of us, I think a lot of people think of educators and they're like, well, Dave, doesn't a district have someone that does curriculum or a curriculum that they use for the students? Why do they need a Milestone C? Like, why would a school district need a Milestone C?
So there's a couple reasons. So first one is most of this technology is new age tech. So even if somebody went to school for engineering 20 years ago and they were an engineer and they went into teaching, they didn't learn this stuff in school. Now they can go back and teach themselves. The hard part there is if that teacher moves on, that school district loses that course, right? They lose that capability. So we're a little more of a permanent solution for a school. Now, most teachers are not former engineers, so they need a lot of help there, right? So we put scaffolding in to help the teachers not have to be the expert, right? That the program helps that the students learn on their own, and the teachers are there to guide that learning. So that's more how we look at it. So now, when you're building this curriculum, it's tough. It's a lot of work. Most of the time when I see schools try to build their own curriculum, it's like half done. It's enough for a teacher to teach with. But that teacher building the curriculum is the one teaching it. And then they move on and there's supposed to be a curriculum there. The new teacher walks in and they have half of what they need. So we developed that full solution. It's, hey, you have it all planned out all year. You have your student handouts, your teacher guides, everything's ready for you. And we talk about it as a tool belt. You don't have to it's not a scripted course. You can delete stuff, add stuff, whatever you want to do as the teacher, but we give you that tool belt and you pick which tools you want to use.
No, I think that's really helpful because I think you bring up some great points, and especially, I mean, your website talks about shaping future STEM leaders. If all of this is such new technology that maybe it's a new course that a school wants to offer that they currently don't have, it's great that you would offer something like that. Just in case my audience doesn't know, can you explain what STEM is and why you think it is so important right now in education?
Yeah, STEM is it's an overused buzzword at this point. So it's science, technology, engineering, and math. Schools do pretty good with the science and the math. The technology, engineering, they struggle with, and they know this. A lot of the new age standards are pushing schools to have to do a lot more technology and engineering. Now, a silver lining on the pandemic is schools got a lot better at technology, or at least they got a bigger appetite for it. So they're still struggling in some ways, they're still behind in some ways, but the schools that I would talk to that didn't have email for their students now have email for their students, right? They didn't have the kids on Chromebooks. Now they're on Chromebooks. So there is a silver lining there. It was a rough year for schools, no way around it. But I think it pushed them in the right direction and it was a good catalyst for change. So for STEM, it's everything around us is becoming robotic, upgraded, right? Your car is easy example. The car production lines, if you've seen the news stories, they're slowed down because there aren't enough chips. So our cars are robots, our phones are robots. Everything around us is becoming automated, or there's an algorithm feeding us YouTube videos. Kids need to learn this technology, and really we try to teach them to general problem solve, to think, to use their brains. Somehow school doesn't force them to use their brains as much as it should. So we try to really put that forward because we don't know where technology is going. As an example, I learned coding in high school. It was a cool course. One teacher took it on himself to teach us. I learned Visual Basic. It's a language no one uses anymore. So, but since I had that, I can go look at Python and go, oh, I know what they're doing, right? So it's very useful to have learned it at some point, and that's what we try to get through to the kids is, hey, you just have to learn this, and you can go do marketing, you can go do something else, but odds are you're going to run into software again. You can't escape it. So that's how we look at the world.
No, I think that's helpful, and I think you're 100% right about this, the importance of technology, and I love that. I love that schools are willing to reach out to companies like yours to actually make that happen, and not just relying on their own people. Because to your point, they might just not have the experience or the knowledge to even do it. So I think that's great. So I want to hear, and I appreciate you sharing what the company does.
Yeah.
Tell me a little bit about, because I think a lot of my audience wants to know this, the differences between working at like a Sikorsky, right, in this amazing huge manufacturing company, to working for yourself. Like share
Yeah.
some of the differences between those two worlds.
Yeah, so let me start with Sikorsky, right? It's standard corporate structure, right? It's a matrix organization. And everybody can look these terms if they don't know them. But if anyone's seen Office Space, right? I have 8 bosses kind of stuff. It is what it is. It's a great place to work. I have no issues saying that, right? It was not my favorite, right? Just for me personally, not the pace, and then the interest level wasn't there. But it's a great place to work. I have 0 issues with it. Now, switching to Bauer, a small company, was very different. Where at Sikorsky, it was, hey, I have 30, 40 engineers on my project. Bauer, it was myself, a software engineer, and electrical engineer. That was it. So you had to figure it out, right? And you didn't have many people to ask, right? There was only, there's 3 other project engineers running around. So really different kind of world there where it was, good luck, right? Oh, that's not working. Good luck. So no, 35-year guy that's just hanging out, just ready to answer questions, where Sikorsky has that. And then switching to working for myself in a startup was, there's no more departments of anything, right? It's, oh, your parts didn't come in. Okay. Call that company. Oh, you're, hey, we got to go cash the checks. Hey, we have to go, do the books. Hey, what do you guys want for lunch today? We don't have anything here. So it was very much, that, classic startup world, like working out of my basement kind of stuff. And now we've graduated to, I think we're more of a small company at this point. If you had to classify us, right? We have processes, we have a few people, right? So more of a small company, which is still different. So now all that responsibility I had, I have to give away. And it's like, but I know how to do it, so I have to let go of those reins a little bit. So sometimes that's a little bit of a struggle.
No, you bring up some great points. I love the experiences that you're sharing, because I think a lot of individuals really don't know what the true differences are, right? So like I've worked for myself, you've worked for yourself. It's very different from working for a company where every 2 weeks you get a paycheck. It's very different, right? Because you're looking at the revenue, you're doing the finances, you're paying yourself, right? So you're paying the employees. It's a different experience, and I appreciate you being honest about how the challenges and how hard it has been, because I think that's really important. I want to ask one more question about the company, and then I want to close the same question I ask every guest. So you've been in business now for a few years. Where do you see Milestone C going? So you've obviously made great progress. Technology is not going away. If anything, it's only going to become a bigger part of our lives. Where do you see the organization going next?
Yeah, so we have 2 big projects. First one is just scale our curriculum, right? So scale it, bring it into more schools. We have a strategic partner, STEMI, that we work with. They're out of Croatia, and they're one of the ones that help us curate some of this technology, right? They're very technically capable folks, and we rely on them to help us do some of that background work. So really growing Milestone C to be a well-established company that is helping schools keep pace. We rapidly change so that news story I said about cars slowing down, we're going to put that into our robotics curriculum right this year because it's relevant. So we make those rapid changes. So that's how we want to be kind of that new age education that doesn't take a year and a half to produce a textbook. So that's one of our big goals. The other one is, it's a little bit of a pie in the sky at this point, but we want to connect education and industry in a stronger way. So we are when industry talks education and education talks industry, they speak totally different languages. They don't understand each other. So I sit in that middle, right? Myself and Milestone C, and I was in industry. I know how they speak and how they think. And I talk to educators. So our goal is, let's say you're in Detroit, you take a car company out there and you say, hey, I want you to fund all these high schools with a manufacturing course. And who's going to be featured in that? You guys. Put your employees on camera, have them talk to those students. So it's this local industry funding, helping schools fund new age programs, putting whatever industry that is, put that technology in the course. So it's kind of this dream that we have of bringing industry and education and making it much stronger. Now, what does industry get out of that? Those companies will never have to look for employees. The employees will come knocking on their door. And I even think it's actually an old school model, the apprenticeship model that used to be out there that somehow went away. Why can't you get reports from those teachers, not grades, not student data, but reports? Say, hey, these 5 kids love doing this. They would be great employees for you. And the company can go tap them and say, hey, you want to come in for a mini, summer internship, whether that's in manufacturing, whether it's in an engineering role, and see if you like it. And then now you're just grooming future employees. So I think that's where we need to go as education needs help doing it. Industry needs those well-trained employees. I know in Connecticut, they're screaming about high-skilled labor. And well, what are you going to do about it? Let's do something, right? Let's actually make that pipeline happen. So we're trying to do that, do our small part, and then we want to kind of ramp that up.
Yeah, no, I think there's a lot of great points you just made about why that's so important, and having someone like yourself is almost like that translator in between might be exactly what we need. So I appreciate you sharing that. So again, Dave, so we will share in the show description. We'll share milestonec.com, which is your website for the business, where people awesome. Can go check it out. Educators can go there. School districts can go there. Check out the resources you have. I'll also put your LinkedIn in the show description as well if anyone wants to get in touch with you to hear about your journey from being an engineer to now being a small business owner. Talk more about STEM, right? Whatever they think they want to get in touch with you about, we'll make sure to put your LinkedIn profile on there as well. So I always close the podcast with the same question with every guest, because I always look for my guests to give some piece of advice to my listeners that I think would help them. So I always ask, like, what has been the one thing, Dave, that's helped you reach your full potential? So that one thing that's helped you be successful, maybe in school, as an engineer, and now as an entrepreneur. Like, what would you share with my audience that's helped you along the way?
Yeah, so I have 2 answers. So one is what I wish I did. So I wish I grabbed what I like and what I'm good at and put them together. So if I went, instead of working at Sikorsky, and went to work at a mountain biking company, I think I would still be there, right? So what I like is mountain biking. I'm good at technical engineering. If I put those together, so that's one thing I always talk about, especially those middle school students. So that's one answer. But to answer you more directly, for me, it was hard work, the ability to learn, and teaching and helping everyone around me, and in whatever role I'm in. Those 3 things, I don't think you can go wrong if you just put in the work, sponge up everything around you, and then help those around you so that when you need help, they'll jump in. Those are I think the 3 things that I would highlight for everyone.
Yeah, and I think those would honestly be applicable whether you're early career, mid career, or further on in your career. I think most people could take advantage of that. So again, thank you so much, Dave, for making time. I know you're super busy with your family and running your own business, but I love what you're doing for really students all across the country, and just helping our educators who we know are, to your point, in the past 18 months even more stressed. Make it a little bit easier for them to teach their students like something really cool, really cutting edge, super tech, without having to do all the work themselves and build the whole curriculum. So I just absolutely love that. So thanks for joining me on the podcast, and I wish you the best.
Nick, thanks for what you do. Thanks for having me on. Right, I think getting these stories out there is going to help folks everywhere.
Absolutely. All right. Thanks, Dave. Stay well.